cherish all the time you spend, you tuned in to. It's time again to cherish all the time you spend, you tuned in to. It's the number one podcast. The topics of discussion when we broadcast. So all them artificial man jokes, we do it natural from the concrete to a public standpoint. Real, wherever you're from, life is coexistence, but to know the real, you just gotta listen. Wherever you're from, life is coexistence, but to know the real.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the 52 Scott Podcast. I'm your host, K Money, and in the building with me, my co-host Slash, Freddie G, and Comedian 96. Collectively, we are the Mind of Men. You can find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at 52 Scott Podcast, Instagram and Facebook, the 52 Scott Podcast, and if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like and or subscribe. Welcome, fellas, to another True Tuesday episode. Today, man, I thought I'd talk about this new bill that was just recently passed, and I can see the beginning of the next school year really starting off with fireworks and firecrackers. The cell phones starting on September 1st will no longer be allowed in Texas schools, which I totally agree with the signing of this for several reasons. I never really thought cell phones belonged in schools in the first place. And when I was raising my kids, that was actually the beginning of when cell phones were starting to, go to school with these kids. And I never really saw a reason for children to actually need a reason to have a cell phone, because we didn't need them when we were going to school. You know, you would go to the office if you needed to make a phone call to your parents and so forth. So I feel like if we were able to get through those times, I don't see a reason why, these current generations can go through the same thing. You have one central location to where you have to use the phone, and I don't think it's going to be any mass casualties or issues going on to where, people are bum rushing and everybody got to use the phone at the same time. So again, that's one of my reasonings for feeling that, I feel that this was a great move on the part of Texas. Now, Texas isn't the only state that has done this. I think there's 8 other states that actually are falling in the same line on the same lines of banning schools. Banning telephones out of schools. The actual devices that are being prohibited are cell phones, tablets, smartwatches, radios, pagers. Which pagers really aren't. I haven't seen a page in a long time. But these are the items that are actually being banned starting September 1st. What do you fellas feel? How do you fellas feel about this new law? And what do you think in regards to the backlash that it's going to receive? Because it's going to receive a lot of backlash.
I think I like this. I like the ban. Now, where it's going to get some backlash is for security purposes. Somebody coming to school to shoot up the place, nobody got no way to communicate except the teachers.
Exactly.
So that can probably be, I guess, a con to it. But the pros to it is the fact that there is no distractions now from kids learning something. Because most of the time they head stuck in that phone.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Even if they doing their work, and they do use computers in schools, but even if they doing their work on the computer, they could have a cell phone on the side still doing this. But if they don't have it, now your focus can be where it should be. So I think that for the number one reason is why I'm agreeing with them banning cell phones from schools.
Now, you took a piece of my story. I actually had a little story written. Can you imagine if you had kids at school and they banned cell phones at the school that your child, your daughter or son is attending, and God forbid, I got to start out by saying that, God forbid you see a screen on CNN, breaking news, 41 shot or 41 unalived at that same school that your son or daughter goes to, but you have no way to call or communicate and ask to see if they're okay because you banned their cell phones. Now, I'm kind of up in the air on this one because, like Slash just said, I like it because it takes the focus off the phones, because them kids love them phones.
Right.
Yeah.
So it does take the focus off. But here's the thing: if you're a high school or a middle school that let them have computers, you think them kids ain't gonna be talking on them computers? You just made it worse to me.
Well,
if you have a computer,
No, because the school can have certain sites blocked
Yeah,
where you
they can
can't
have it
get
set up
outside
to where
of
you
them.
won't be able to access
Yeah.
this or that. I'm sure.
Now, what I know about a company I work for, they use what was called an intranet, and that's just inside of
right
you
there
know
in
that
school.
network. That's
Okay.
all. You can't go outside of that.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure that's how these schools are setting that up because you can't just have an open.
But you know they
website.
have surrounding networks. They be have like you might have a school that's right by a Shell. You can log on to a Shell gas station.
Yeah,
one,
but I
and you
don't
can
think-
log on to different.
But do you
Well,
know
that's where
how
the firewalls are coming to play. You know, if they got
Yeah.
a cold IT department, they won't have to worry about any of these
well, the
issues.
distance from a anywhere near a school, being that school yards are big, I don't think you get Wi-Fi from down the street.
Yeah, I agree.
So I mean, I
Probably
think
not,
they're
yeah.
pretty protected as far as
Yeah.
when it comes to that, and it does take the focus off the phone for the kids to get some sort of education. I hope it worked. You know,
I'm kind of man. I'm up in the air on that.
Yeah,
I'm up in the air because times have changed, and there are more mass casualties in schools today than it was when we were in school. As far as being distracted, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. There's so many other things that can distract kids than cell phones. Case in point, when I was in school, didn't have cell phones, but I was in the back of the class shooting dice. I really was.
Yep.
Didn't have cell phones, but I was in the back of the class playing 3-card Monte. Didn't have cell phones, but I was in the back of the class with the 3 bottle tops firing the P. I was doing that too.
get like me.
Now, see, I
Yep.
understand.
Yep, and get like me.
I understand those distractions, and I fault your teacher, Freddie G,
Yeah.
for allowing those
teacher-
type of things
yeah,
to go on
that's
in that
teacher
classroom.
problem.
So you know what? You're right, but that's the same thing. Let me show you something. In regards to the cell phones and being the distraction cell phone, the teacher need to have some sort of control in the classroom.
at all times.
And so I don't necessarily think that well, let me put it to you this way. When I was doing those things, I was still able to hide that from these teachers. You were still able to do it. So a lot of times these teachers give you your work for the day,
Right.
and they'll walk out the classroom.
Yeah, a lot of them did.
They'll walk out the classroom.
And that's where I could see, you know, those type of distractions being able to take place. But if a teacher's in the class, I can't see why and how they're allowing you to be distracted doing the things that you say you were doing back in our day. But if a teacher were to walk out of a class in today's society or generation and cell phones are allowed in the class, I guarantee you 90% of that class
Was
will
on their
stop
cell
doing the work
phone.
and they're on the cell phone.
You better believe
Yeah.
it.
And here's another thing. Even if the teachers were in the class today,
Yeah.
what you think them teachers are doing when they gave the work out? Those
their
teachers
phone.
on their cell phones.
On their cell phone.
Well,
Because
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you this here. I know several school teachers. And I guarantee you they on their cell phones in class
Man,
and posting on IG.
I
Yep,
know
yep,
Uber drivers, and they be driving and be on their phone.
They be on their phone.
So,
Yep.
the
Nah,
phone is major.
Now, according to this law, schools are required to adopt disciplinary procedures for students who break these rules. Now, if they have to adopt, you know, disciplinary procedures for students, I think that also should apply to faculty as well.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to back up some because a couple of you guys mentioned, if not all three, mentioned as one of the cons on not having a cell phone is, you know, if mass casualties were to occur, like a school shooting, which there seems to be a lot of nowadays. And I do agree with that. However, I think if schools take the necessary measures, like possibly locking it down during school hours, you know, restricting, you know, the certain access to schools during school hours, you know, it would definitely be beneficial. And if I can remember correctly, I think when my kids were in school, the teachers actually had telephones in the classrooms.
Yeah.
So the students will still have access to phones. It's just not their personal phone. I just don't see a reason or a need for each student
To have a phone.
to have a cell phone. Yeah, it's a major distraction.
It is.
And you also have to look at the cyberbullying that goes on when fights go on in schools. How they're recording these
Recording
things,
the phone, yeah,
and they're
recording
on
the
social
fights.
media the next day, if not the next hour. I said the next day, which I exaggerated, but they're actually on social media. If it's not going live, they're on right away. So I definitely see the benefit of taking these phones, not taking them, but just regulating. And I think that's what's going to be the biggest issue for these schools is regulating this law and making sure that it's enforced. But to these kids,
These kids, I'm gonna tell you.
they're gonna find a way to
of course.
get around this law, and that's why I think it's important to the school on how they enforce it.
Let me also say, K Money, you mentioned about the mass shootings and stuff like that, where you're saying taking measures to lock the schools down.
Yes, sir.
Well, a lot of those casualties come from the students within. They're already bringing these guns in the school. So some of these casualties are the actual students. So the guns are already in.
Okay, so that's where if you are at a school that's known for having violence, or if you suspect any violence could occur at your school, which I think all schools should take that measure that it could happen on any school campus, have these type of machines, the
Metal detectors, man.
Yeah, metal detectors.
We've been saying that for a long time. Just put the metal
Okay, now
detectors.
here's the
at
thing.
But it's not a prison.
Here's the thing.
That's gonna be the argument.
There are some schools with
Yeah.
metal detectors.
They do.
And I will tell you this: a lot of those schools with metal detectors are alternative schools, meaning that the kids that got in trouble in regular schools
Yeah.
had to go to these alternative schools like M.R. Woods.
And that's where they got the
to
metal detectors.
in
but they
M.R.
don't
Woods.
trust
Yeah,
their
M.R. Woods is in Sugarland.
Okay.
But they would actually Sugarland, Texas, by the way. But they got in trouble in the regular schools,
Right.
and they had to go to M.R. Woods or alternative schools, and those alternative schools have those metal detectors. Now, I do agree that you can put metal detectors in schools, but here's the deal that you're dealing with, especially with a school district, a city like Houston or a state like Texas, right? You're dealing with the budget. And we know here in HISD, the Mike Myers, the appointed
right.
superintendent, and all of the stuff that's surrounding him or whatever, it's hard to even get money in some of these schools, or they're cutting budgets. So they'll have to factor that into the budget.
Now let me say something, because what just came to mind to me about the metal detectors and the cell phones is, okay, how do you determine which kids have a cell phone without the metal detector? Because the kids gonna bring the phone in. How else you gonna find the phones if you ain't got the metal
They're gonna
detector?
go to that side gate, put it over there by the tree.
How do you
Well,
but
back around.
understand what I'm saying? It's 1,000 kids at this school. Every last one of them got a phone. But how do you determine
here's-
and how do
here's
you
the thing.
collect that phone from every
Exactly.
I don't think it'll be that way. Let me tell you why. So, I think that by putting this bill into place or passing this bill, it just becomes a part of the rules,
Right.
the do's and don'ts of the school. Case in point, we know that you're not supposed to have dice at school.
Yeah. If
But
you
you're
caught
not.
with it,
But you're
yeah.
not searching my pocket to
Right.
see if I have
Get
dice.
dice.
So the kids will have their cell phones. The thing is
If they get
you better
caught.
not pull it out.
using it.
Or if you pull it out and you get caught, there are disciplinary actions.
I understand.
Whereas before, there were no disciplinary actions with having these cell phones in school. So these kids will still have their cell phone in school. They're just consequences to if they're caught with their cell phone versus where they were before.
So
There
that's-
were no consequences.
That's gonna be a disaster.
Well, I think that's currently how things used to be. How you mentioned it just now, Freddie G. Kids, like you say, every child is going to come to school with the phone.
They
So
gonna have it.
Whether or not they get caught with it or not is a thing. But I think now it's saying schools must choose one of the two options. They either ban students from bringing the devices all together to school, or they lock them up in lockers or lock pouches, charging stations, or backpacks. And they're locked up, throughout the day, and then I guess at the end of the school day,
They get it
they're
back.
able to retrieve the school.
So that means that your child now has to register their
Either
cell phone.
check their phone in or something
with
on
this
those
school.
lines. Right.
Well, it's
I mean,
gonna be a disaster.
You got to do whatever you got to do, like I say, to enforce this, because this is a law now.
Right.
So the
They
schools
finna
have to do
figure it
whatever.
out. Yeah.
And Freddie G, you mentioned about the budget with installing metal detectors. Now, if I was Greg Abbott, who's the governor of Texas, I would have thought that this is something that would have been considered in regards to, because you have to know that this is going to be one of the main arguments that parents are going to have. What are we going to do when we have these two school shootings? And just, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago they had one major school shooting here in Uvalde County here in Houston,
right.
which
Yeah,
is one that is kind of still being talked about today. So you have to know that this is an argument that they're gonna ride, to try to fight this recent law being signed.
Here's the thing too, man. Like, so the metal detector conversation, we shouldn't have to get to a point to where we're banning the cell phones to have the conversation about metal detectors. That metal detector conversation should have come about years
ago.
all the way back
I
to
agree.
Sandy Hook,
Right.
I agree.
over a decade ago.
Yeah,
I
long
agree.
time.
I agree. So I don't understand why it would even be an issue, but that's just a side that the school districts can use to explain some of the safety precautions that they've implemented, and along with not having these phones. Like I said, if teachers do have phones in their rooms, then what's the problem?
So
Right.
that's what I want to say. Is it held to teachers or just the students?
Say again.
Is it held to teachers not bringing their phones as
I don't
well,
think
or just
they
the
can do
students?
that with.
Well, I
the
said
teachers.
earlier, if this applies, if schools have to implement a disciplinary procedure for students, I think it also should apply to faculty.
No, because you got to protect yourself against these. Can you imagine a
But if you have
hormone age kid in
If you
your
have a
class?
landline in the room, a landline telephone in the classroom,
but you need to record when one of these students is acting weird, and you need to, hey, he's jumping stupid with me. You done seen it many times when the student try to get up and slap the teacher, and you done seen all those videos.
Well, now
you gotta
but
protect yourself.
Here, I think that should fall on the school itself.
Yeah.
You should have cameras
Cameras
in the
in
classroom.
every.
So
room.
that ain't got nothing to do with somebody having a phone. It should be
That's true.
cameras in the classroom
and that's
already.
going to also go
Yeah.
along with the budget.
And
Right.
I think that the cameras need to go in line with. Remember back in the day when we were in school, they had panic buttons.
Yeah, we did.
They
Yeah.
had those little intercom buttons that
Right.
you can push. Mm-hmm. So
And that's what I'm saying. The shit worked in our day, even though I know times have changed. A panic button, your response time just need to be up. Hold drills throughout the year. When you have these type of say
while
again?
pushing the panic button.
hey, look, I'm gonna tell you a panic button story. Y'all remember Miss Lubar?
yeah.
Nah, I don't.
Yeah, Miss Lubar was
It was
English
English.
teacher. Yep, English teacher at the yard, right? And that was an individual. I ain't gonna say his last name, but first name was Philip. And he put a tack in Miss Lubar's desk. She sat on it, and she say, "Philip, I know you're the cause of this." And she went over to get ready to punch the panic button. Now he wrong, but he say, "Miss Lubar, you touch that button, I'm gonna break your jaw." She said, she said back down. No, she said back down.
She sat back down.
Yeah, she went back and she sat back down.
She didn't want no problem.
Now listen, Miss Lubar was an old white lady,
Right.
and he was wrong for
He
that.
was wrong.
He was wrong.
Yeah,
He was
but,
wrong.
But he didn't get in trouble.
No,
he didn't get that panic
he
button pushed.
He put a thumbtack in her desk on her chair.
And she
she
sat
sat
on
on it, and she jumped. And she was like,
Philip,
Philip, I know you're the
did
cause
this."
of this. And she took it out, and she went to go punch the
She
panic
finna
button.
tell on Philip.
He said, Miss Lubar, you touch that button, I'm going to break your jaw.
Yeah, she
So,
was tell on.
Yeah, he wrong.
Did she do anything after class? Do you know?
No,
Wow.
no.
She need her jaw.
Now, Freddie G, you mentioned, and I'm saying you, Freddie G, because you did mention our times are different now versus how they were when we were in school. the generation is also different than how we
Right.
were. This generation, and I'm saying this, I think this is only one downfall or another con for not having phones, because this generation is extremely disrespectful.
Yeah.
And they will boot up to these
Yeah.
teachers,
Yeah.
quick, fast, and hurried. Case in point, the example that Comedian 96 just utilized. So in those situations, I can see where, a phone definitely would benefit the teacher, because a response time possibly again would come a lot sooner than it would, with them trying to get to that panic button, or even trying to make that phone call on the phone that they have in the classroom. The student could prevent that from occurring. But outside of that, I really, like I say, I really think that this is going to benefit in the long run. It's just the initial adjustment and the change that these students are going to get used to, and I think that's going to be the hardest part, because we've seen several videos. I know I have, where a teacher told a student to get off the phone, or tried to remove the phone from the student, and they denied them. You disrespecting your teacher at this point, which these are the things that's going to go away, because even outside the school, us as humans, we nothing is personal nowadays. Nobody's actually talking on these phones. They're more or less on social media, or they're texting one another. So removing phones from the school classroom, I think, allows the children to interact with each other a lot more. Also,
Teach them some social.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
They finna go back to playing Get Like Me,
Hey, but I'd rather them do that.
shooting dice.
We turned out all right. We turned out okay.
Yeah, we did. But here's the thing. It's gonna be interesting school year, because with just the kids' hormones, entitled kids, the pretty rich kids.
Oh, yeah.
You got so many factors of different types of kids, and I was gonna put it on a race. I was gonna say black.
Oh,
I
no,
thought about
it's
white.
all.
I thought every.
It's
I say,
all.
what? It's gonna be every color. It doesn't matter. I think it's gonna be a lot of suspensions. This school year.
I think it's gonna be. I don't know about suspension, but I just know you're gonna see a lot of parents complaining about this, that, and the other, where this new law is concerned. I'm all for it, and again, I do think that this is gonna help in the long run. I am looking forward to the beginning of the school year, just to see the drama and all the fireworks that I expect to happen. That's gonna come from this, but. Until then, man, I appreciate y'all joining us. Make sure y'all like the show. Come back next week. Peace out. This concludes another True Tuesday episode, and be sure you tune in tomorrow for another episode of Women Wednesday with Freddie G. Don't forget to follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at 52 Scott Podcast, Instagram and Facebook, the 52 Scott Podcast, and if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like and or subscribe. And to all my 52 Scott faithfuls, it may be new to you, but if you heard it here, then you know it's true.